My mother forced me to forget my dead father to accept her new husband's baby. She got married 3 weeks after the funeral, erased all his photos. But when I turned 18, I ran away and now she says I'm an ungrateful son. I'm 22 years old. I work at an electronics store, and it's been like 6 months since I've talked to my mother. And honestly, I don't know if I ever will again. I know it sounds heavy, like, it's your mom, right? But when I tell you everything that happened, you're going to understand why I got to this point. I guess I should start from the beginning, when I was like 7 years old and my parents got divorced. My sister Abigail was 9, and even though we were kids, it wasn't as traumatic as it sounds because we already knew things weren't good between them. They were always fighting, those fights where they try to talk quietly but you still hear them from your room, and eventually they didn't even bother hiding it. The divorce was kinda weird, but also like a relief. You know what I mean? Because at least there wasn't that constant tension in the house anymore. The thing is that after the divorce, things calmed down quite a bit. Dad moved to an apartment not too far away, like 20 minutes, and we stayed with Mom in the house. We had a shared custody arrangement that worked well, like, we spent alternating weekends with Dad and some weekday afternoons. Mom seemed to be okay. Or, that's what Abigail and I thought. She focused a lot on her work. She was an accountant at a medium-sized company. And for a while, everything was relatively normal. I was in elementary school, played soccer on Saturdays, had my neighborhood friends, and even though I missed having Dad at home all the time, it wasn't terrible. Dad was always a good father, never missed payments, always showed up on time to pick us up, took us out for ice cream and stuff like that. He was quiet but affectionate, you know? One of those dads who aren't super expressive but you know he'd do anything for you. It went on like that for about 4 years. I was 11 and Abigail was 13. When Mom started dating Gregory, she introduced him to us kind of casually, like, "Hey kids, this is my friend Gregory, we're going to the movies together." Gregory was weird. Not in a bad way, just weird. Super quiet, kind of socially awkward, worked in something with systems or computers, I don't remember exactly. What I do remember perfectly is that he had a baby, Daniel, who was like 6 months old at the time. The baby's mom wasn't in the picture. We never really knew what happened there, if they'd gotten divorced or what, but Gregory was a single father with this baby. And this is where things started getting really weird. Mom became obsessed with that baby. I don't know how else to describe it. Literally overnight, she stopped being our mom and became Daniel's mom. Every time Gregory came to the house, which was more and more often, Mom spent the entire time holding the baby, talking to him in that ridiculous voice people use with babies, buying him clothes and toys. At first, Abigail and I thought it was cute. Like, okay, Mom likes babies, makes sense. But then it got intense. Mom started talking about Daniel as if he were her son, saying things like, "My baby needs this," or, "I have to take the baby to the doctor." And Gregory just let her. I think he was happy to have help, because being a single father with a baby must be exhausting. When I was like 14 years old, Dad died. It was a car accident, super sudden. Like, we saw him on Friday for pizza, and on Sunday they called us from the hospital to tell us he'd had an accident on the highway and didn't make it. I still can't think much about that without feeling like someone's squeezing my chest, you know? I was 14 years old, Abigail 16, and our dad was just gone. It was devastating. Abigail locked herself in her room for weeks. I stopped going to school for a while. Everything was like being in a constant fog where nothing felt real. And here comes the part that still makes my blood boil. Mom and Gregory were already planning their wedding. They had a date and everything. It was like 2 months after Dad died. And when I say Dad died, and you'd expect Mom to postpone the wedding or something, well, no. She did it exactly as planned, 3 weeks after Dad's funeral. 3 weeks. Abigail begged her to wait. Like, "Mom? Seriously? We just buried Dad. Can't we have a little time to process this?" But Mom said no, that they'd already paid for everything, that Gregory and Daniel needed her, that life goes on. So there we were, 3 weeks after losing our father, at a wedding pretending to be happy while Mom married Gregory and basically adopted Daniel as her son. After the wedding, things went from bad to worse. Mom started acting like Dad had never existed. She took down all his photos from the house, even the photos where Abigail and I were with him. When we asked her why, she said it was time to start fresh, that we needed to focus on our new family. Our new family. Like you could just replace a dad who'd just died with some quiet guy and his baby. And the worst part, what really made me start to hate her, was what she did with our paternal grandparents. Our grandparents obviously wanted to keep seeing us. They'd just lost their son. We were all they had left of him. Mom had full custody now that Dad had died, so technically she decided. And what she decided was that if the grandparents wanted to see us, Daniel had to be included in all visits. Can you believe it? She told Dad's grandparents, who had literally just buried their son, that if they wanted to see their grandchildren, they had to accept Gregory's baby as part of the package too. My grandparents tried to reason with her. Like, we understand Daniel is part of your new family, but this is our time with Connor and Abigail. We want to honor our son's memory with them. But Mom didn't budge. It was with Daniel or nothing. My grandparents eventually accepted because they wanted to see us, but it was super awkward. We'd arrive at their house with Daniel, who was like 2 years old by then, and Mom insisted we treat him like our brother, Abigail. And I had to play with him, include him in everything, and if we didn't, Mom would scold us in front of everyone. I remember once it was Dad's birthday. His parents made a meal to remember him, put up photos of him. We told stories. It was nice but sad, you know? And Mom showed up with Gregory and Daniel and insisted that Daniel should be at the center of everything. Literally. She put the kid in the middle of the table with Dad's photos and said something like, "This is a family gathering. Daniel is part of the family." My grandparents went quiet. Abigail started crying and went to the bathroom, and I just wanted to disappear. That continued for years. Like, my entire adolescence was this toxic dynamic where Mom tried to force us to accept this new family she'd created while erasing any trace of Dad. We couldn't mention Dad without her getting defensive or changing the subject. We couldn't have photos of him in our rooms without her making comments like, "Don't you think it's time to move on?" Gregory never said anything. I think he was intimidated by Mom, or just didn't want to get in trouble. He just went with the flow. And Daniel, the poor kid, had no idea about all the drama. He was just a kid being a kid. When I turned 18, I couldn't take it anymore. I'd started working at an electronics store part-time while finishing high school. I'd saved some money, and my girlfriend Victoria, who I'd been dating for like 6 months at that point, offered for me to move in with her. Well, technically it was her parents' apartment, but they were okay with me staying there if I paid part of the rent. So, that's what I did. One afternoon while Mom was at work, I packed my things, left her a note saying I was moving out but would stay in touch, and left. It wasn't dramatic or anything. I just left. Mom obviously got furious. She called me like 1,000 times that day, sent me messages saying I was ungrateful. How could I abandon my family like that? That Daniel needed me. Daniel needed me. A 5-year-old kid who was basically a stranger to me, according to her, he needed me. I ignored most of the messages, just responded that I needed my space, that I was an adult now and could make my own decisions. Abigail still lived at home, but she was 20 and in college, spent most of her time on campus anyway, so she wasn't there much. I thought Mom would eventually calm down and things would get better, but no. Like 2 weeks after I moved out, she showed up at my work. During lunch hour, she walked into the store like a hurricane and started yelling at me in front of customers and my coworkers about how I was a bad brother, how I was being selfish, how Daniel asked about me and I was hurting him by leaving. My manager had to ask her to leave or he'd call security. It was humiliating. Like, I'd never felt so embarrassed in my life. My coworkers afterwards were asking if I was okay, and I didn't even know what to tell them. After that, the constant messages started. Text messages, voicemails. She even sent me letters to Victoria's apartment, though I don't know how she got the address. It was always the same thing. That I was a bad son. That I was destroying the family. That I needed to come home and be the big brother Daniel needed. Not once did she ask how I was. If I was okay. If I needed anything. Everything was about Daniel. 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 Like my feelings. My grief over Dad. All of that didn't matter. One day, like 3 months after I moved out. I was at the apartment with Victoria watching a movie when there was a knock at the door. Victoria went to open it, and it was Mom. She came in without being invited and started yelling at me right there in the living room. She was saying I didn't deserve to be part of the family, that I'd chosen to be a stranger, that if I didn't love Daniel, then she didn't want me. Victoria tried to intervene, like very politely telling Mom she needed to calm down or would have to leave, but Mom completely ignored her. She kept yelling at me for like 10 minutes, saying horrible things, and eventually Victoria threatened to call the police, and Mom left. But before leaving, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Your father would be ashamed of you," and left, slamming the door. That broke me. I'm not going to lie. I cried that night for the first time in years. Because the worst part is that part of me wondered if she was right, you know? Like, was I the bad guy here? Was I being selfish? But Victoria helped me see that no, that what Mom was doing was pure manipulation, that I had the right to set boundaries and live my life without being forced to accept a family dynamic that made me miserable. Abigail also supported me. In fact, she barely went home by then, spent all her time on campus or with friends because she couldn't stand the situation either. The next day, I blocked Mom's number. On my phone, on social media, everything. I needed peace, and as long as she could contact me, I'm going to have it. Abigail did the same eventually, like a month later when Mom started pressuring her to convince me to come back. We both just cut contact with her, with Gregory, with Daniel, with that whole world Mom had built where we were the villains for not forgetting our dead father. Like 3 months ago, my aunt, Margaret, Mom's sister, contacted me. Aunt Margaret was always neutral in all this. Like, she understood both sides but didn't take sides. She told me that Mom was telling the whole family that Abigail and I had abandoned her for no reason, that we were ungrateful children who'd left her alone with a small child. She didn't even mention Gregory in her version of events. It was like she was a single mother. Aunt Margaret asked me what had really happened, and I told her everything, from beginning to end. She was quiet for a while after I finished and then just said, "I'm so sorry, Connor. I didn't know things were that bad." Last week I met up with Abigail at a coffee shop near her university. We hadn't talked in person in a while, just messages here and there, and we needed to talk about all this. Abigail is studying psychology, which is ironic but also makes sense, and she told me she'd been working a lot in therapy on everything related to Mom and Dad. She told me she'd come to accept that Mom probably will never change, that for some reason she needed to completely replace Dad and create this perfect new family in her head, and that we didn't fit into that vision because we reminded her of what she'd lost or whatever. We talked for hours. We cried a little, laughed at how absurd everything was, remembered good things about Dad. Abigail told me she's been visiting the grandparents without telling anyone, that they're okay, but obviously sad that everything turned out like this. She told me I should go see them, that it would probably do them good. And she's right, I should. I think I will soon. I don't know if I'll ever talk to Mom again. Part of me misses having a mom, you know? Like the mom I had before all this happened. But that person doesn't exist anymore, or maybe never really existed. Victoria tells me the door is open. If someday Mom really apologizes and acknowledges the harm she did, but honestly, I don't think that's going to happen. And that's okay, I guess. I've built my own life. I have people who really love me. I have my job. I have Abigail. I have Victoria. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and nobody's trying to force me to be someone I'm not, or to forget the people I love. Yesterday was Dad's birthday. He'd be 52 now. I went to the cemetery alone, brought him some flowers, sat there for a while talking to him about what's happened. And I realized that I don't need Mom's permission to remember him, to love him, to keep him alive in my memory. That's enough for now.